My name is Eliana. I'm originally from the San Francisco Bay Area. I made Aliyah with my parents to Herzliya as a child. And 22 years ago, my husband and I made another Aliyah up to the mountains of the beautiful Binyamin region. We live in Eli, a town named after Eli, the high priest, who was the last high priest to serve in the Mishkan, in the Tabernacle, in Shiloh. We lived in a caravan for 10 years, and after 10 long years, we decided that we'd like to finally build our home. We were looking at the different options. There was one plot of land overlooking the place where the Mishkan, the Tabernacle, stood in Shiloh so many thousands of years ago. But let's talk about Shiloh. For 40 years, the children of Israel wandered through the desert with Moses leading them, carrying the tabernacle on their back. And after 40 years, Joshua ben Nun leads them into the promised land. The Mishkan, the tabernacle, is in Gilgal, near Jericho, 7 years of conquering and 7 years of settling. After that time, Joshua comes to Shiloh and establishes the first capital of Israel in the first state of Israel. For 369 years, the tabernacle stands in Shiloh. 369 years, Shiloh is Israel's first capital. 369 years of priesthood, of kehuna, 369 years of pilgrimage, of aliyah laregel. That's a long period of time. In comparison, the first Beit HaMikdash, the first temple, stands in Jerusalem for 410 years. The second temple stands in Jerusalem for 420 years. And it says in the Talmud that in Shiloh, the tabernacle was a stone structure. It was built of stone on the bottom and fabric on the top. But for 400 years, it's acting as a temple. Why not just finish the structure? Because Shiloh means shalva umenucha, tranquility and resting place. Jerusalem is the nachala, is the inheritance. We're on a journey. One day, we'll make it to Jerusalem. When we built our home, we built the infrastructure and found hundreds of pottery shards. I was studying for my master's in Land of Israel study and archaeology at the time at Bar Ilan University, and I had a feeling I knew when the pottery shards were from, but I wanted to be sure. I took a pillowcase, stuffed it with pottery shards, and drove to Bar Ilan University. Approached my professor after class and asked him to help me date some pieces of pottery. He was sure I'd give him 2-3 pieces, and I take out my pillowcase, dump it on his table, and he says, "Are you crazy? This is illegal." I said, "But it's not from an ancient site. It's from my backyard." He said, "Where do you live?" I said, "I live in Eli, overlooking Shiloh in what's called Bechol Haro'eh, everywhere one can see." Now let's embark on a journey through time, go back 3,500 years in time to the time that Shiloh was Israel's capital. It's a small place. And so you can stand in line, offer your sacrifice, but you don't have to eat it in Shiloh. You can eat it on any of the mountains overlooking Shiloh as long as you can see the place of the tabernacle. I always tell people that visit our home that this is where they invented the disposable dishes. Now, why is that? Pottery is porous, and according to Jewish law, it absorbs the kedusha, the holiness of the sacrifice, therefore must be broken after use. So we have pieces of broken dishes from Jewish families from 3,500 years ago all over our backyard. When we planned our home, we used a floor plan of a home from the time of Joshua found in the excavations in Shiloh, a typical Israelite home. Made a few changes. I don't think Joshua had underfloor heating or running water, and that's something that we have. But it was important to us to build like they built in ancient times. And every one of our windows tells a different story. Every one of the views is a piece of history. When you sit down at our dining room table, you look straight down at Shiloh, and we kindly ask our guests not to break the dishes at the end of the meal. They can wash them or clear them and help out. The living room window, we can see, we call it the Hanukkah window. You look straight out and you can see the place of the first battle of the Maccabees against the Greeks and the place of the final battle of the Maccabees against the Greeks. As a child growing up in California, it was my dream to celebrate Christmas. I begged my parents every year for the tree and to decorate it and the gifts, and let's be like everyone in my class. They explained to me that we're Jewish, we celebrate Hanukkah, and one day I'll understand. What we do at my home today, My children wait for the first night of Hanukkah. We turn out the lights, look through this big window, and act out that first battle that occurred at night. The children dress up as Maccabees and Greeks and elephants, and they love reliving the historical story. When you walk out our front door, you look straight ahead and see two mountains, Mount Gerizim and Mount Aval, the mountain of the blessing and the mountain of the curse. The place of the covenant between the people of Israel and the land of Israel, the Torah of Israel in Israel. And that's our anchor. That's our message to our children walking out the door every day, that the Torah is a blessing. When I wake up in the morning and I say my morning prayers, I look down, right down the mountain, at that same place that Hannah stood so many thousands of years ago and prayed her famous prayer. She stood there praying for a child for herself, but later realizing that there's no king in Israel and every man is doing what's right in his own eyes. Israel needs a savior. She prays for a savior for Israel and is blessed with Samuel the prophet. Samuel the prophet who will later anoint King David and build Jerusalem. Last week, our youngest son turned 3. And it's a Jewish tradition to cut hair for the first time when a boy reaches the age of 3. I wanted it to be a special and meaningful day, so we took him to Shiloh. We stood at the place of the Tabernacle, and my husband and I said a prayer of thanksgiving. When I held on to his chubby little hand and started walking back to the car, I couldn't stop thinking about Hannah, about what she gave up, about what she left there in the Mishkan in Shiloh with Eli the high priest, and what she sacrificed for her nation. 1867, Samuel arrives in Shiloh, but not Samuel the prophet, Samuel L. Clemens, otherwise known as Mark Twain. And this is what Mark Twain has to say about Shiloh in his book, The Innocents Abroad. About daylight we passed Shiloh, where the Ark of the Covenant rested for 300 years, and at whose gates good old Eli fell down and broke his neck. But Shiloh had no charms for us. We were so cold that there was no comfort but in motion, so drowsy we could hardly sit up on our horses. After a while, we came to a shapeless mass of ruins, which still bears the name Beit El. The further we went, the hotter the sun got, the more rocky, bare, repulsive, and dreary the landscape became. 100 years later, 1967, we miraculously regained this beautiful biblical heartland. Shiloh today is a national heritage site with over 100,000 visitors a year. I don't have a need to travel the world anymore. Just sitting in the cafeteria sipping coffee, you meet people from all over the world. People that have come from all over the world to excavate. People that have come from all over the world to learn our history. And people who come from all over the world to pray. About 23 years ago, a couple from Miami came to pray in Shiloh. They had 3 daughters, but really, really wanted a son. The wife's name is Hannah. A friend of hers said, "You want a son so much, why don't you go to Shiloh?" And that's exactly what she did. She stood and prayed for a son. 9 months later, gave birth to Shmuel, her son Samuel. Samuel came when he was 13 to Shiloh, had the most magnificent and meaningful bar mitzvah ever. And when he was 18, he enlisted in the IDF. But the story doesn't end here. Her daughter called me up a while back and said, "Eliana, I'd really like you to take us on a tour of Shiloh. And we have some friends from Miami who've never been to the area. And I have a surprise for you." She gets off the bus with a beautiful baby with earrings and says, "Eliana, I'd like you to meet Eliana. I'll tell you the story when we walk into the ancient site." So we're all walking together, and I see she has another stroller with another baby. And she stands there at the ancient site and tells her story. She says to me, "All my friends know that I had a dream of having a large family. But unfortunately, it's not really working out. So I came to Shiloh and asked God to speed things up a bit. And I asked him for twins. These are my twins, Eliana and Eitan. Eliana means my God answered. And we stood there sobbing together and saying our prayer of gratitude in the exact same place that Hannah stood 3,500 years before. I'm inviting you all to come, to visit, to tour the biblical heartland. The biblical heartland in Judea and Samaria, to taste the award-winning wines, to visit the art galleries, the industrial zones, go shopping in the shopping centers, stay at the lovely bed and breakfasts. But I must warn you to watch your step, because everywhere you walk, you'll be walking on biblical verses.